So today I want to provide some updates to my previous video about the New York Times Tech Guild. So in that previous video, I had gone over a lot of the details about what's been transpiring with the New York Times Tech Guild and their struggle to be recognized as a union by the New York Times. This had included allegations against the Times for unfair labor practices that led to the Guild walking out on Wednesday. Since the Wednesday walkout, new information has come out that provides confirmation of the New York Times' motivation and provides a lot of context about the timing of things, especially the walkouts and how things have transpired since then. So, what we have to go over for this is an article from the Daily Beast, where they have an article here: the New York Times lawyers accidentally sent private strategy memo to the staff union. And what's essentially happened here is that the lawyers who were supposed to represent the Times and provide a lot of the information and strategy for how they were supposed to handle and limit the union accidentally got into the hands of staff union, meaning the staff union had access to all of that information and has thus leaked it out. So we should really talk about what the Times' strategy was in that regard. To go over it in a little more detail, what happened is that last Thursday, a partner at the firm, Proskauer Rose, sent an email to a bunch of his colleagues and at the firm and the New York Times senior vice president. The email was titled Tech Organizing Unit Scope Decision Options, which laid out how the paper could respond to the recent efforts by tech and product staffers to form a union. Now, this email was also CC'd to a one Rachel Sanders, who is an organizer for the New York chapter of News Guild, which represents staffers at news organizations including the New Yorker, Reuters, the Daily Beast, and Times Tech Workers. Which means that it's fairly obvious why the Daily Beast is the one reporting on this. They are the ones who got access to the information, given that it was leaked to somebody who, basically represents staffers at that news organization. And again, given this is something that a lot of companies do, where they access lawyers to try to find the best options possible for them to avoid paying out to a union. And so as we look more into this email, there was one slide in this slideshow that was in the email called Operating Principles, where the lawyers discussed management's potential goals, which could include supervisors not being involved in the union and seeking, quote, the smallest bargaining unit that's justifiable, or seeking, quote, the bargaining unit where we are most likely to win the election that would effectively defeat the unionization effort. So what we're getting here is the fairly obvious notion, but it's just a confirmation, right, that basically they had two goals in mind. Either your goal is to weaken the electoral vote of the union so much that you can preserve your position so that there is no union, or you try to make the union as small as possible so that it affects the bottom line of a company the least. And that seems to be what they went with. As we know, the firm actually laid out three potential paths going forward. There was a large, medium, or small size union option. Each came with their own considerations. The Times outside lawyers reasoned that the paper would have its highest chance of winning the election outright against the union if the paper agreed to potentially allow for more staff into the unit. But the law firm also suggested that a larger unit would prevent the paper from attracting and retaining talent. So they had to really weigh that out for themselves to figure out, well, do we focus on winning the election or do we focus on retaining and attracting talent? Now, given that the other option, the smaller unit, basically made it so that the team would likely win the Labor Relations Board election, but it would be much more limited in scope, resulting in a union nearly half the size of what's being proposed. And the paper opted for what was considered the most aggressive of all the options, which would keep the union under 400 people. So originally, the union was supposed to be formed with about 650 people that are represented by the Tech Guild. They tried to limit that down to about 400 people by eliminating approximately 250 people that would be considered not within the scope of that particular union. And that was the proposal they had put forward. So basically what's going on here is that out of all of these options, the union has tried to opt for the one that would benefit them. The company, rather, the New York Times, has gone for the option that would benefit them the most at the cost of the union by making it as small and fragile as possible. The goal in all of this is to make the union as weak as possible, even if it does exist. If it has to exist, it has to be weak. And yeah, we already knew a lot of this going forward, but it's nice to have a confirmation that this is specifically the tactic that's being worked towards. That as they're going through all of these negotiations, that they are specifically seeking this. And it's kind of validating to find out this information and to find out that this is the kind of thing that companies do talk about behind the scenes. It kind of eliminates some of that maybe potential doubt that one might have from constantly hearing, no, that's not what we're doing, that's not what we're doing, and that's not what we're doing. And again, it's just nice to get that confirmation. Yes, this is what they're doing. Everything that we believed going forward is in fact happening. Now, to add to this, there has been some doubt called in by the New York Times when it comes to the type of language that they're using to blame the union for what's transpiring, and that the unions are the ones breaking down negotiations. And this is quite another common tactic in addition to what I previously talked about, where we have here an article from discourseblog.com, the New York Times won't stop gaslighting its unionizing workers. Now, what's happened here is that in an audio provided to Discourse blog by a source who was present at a meeting, one of the people involved responded to these questions by calling the tech guild, quote, unprecedented. Now, I covered a little bit of this in the previous video. In a lot of ways, the tech guild is kind of unprecedented. Tech workers have historically not been unionized. There's often a push against them. Their conditions are considered too cushy for such things. And a lot of lies are perpetuated about tech workers and their positioning in jobs that make it so that these larger companies can avoid their unionization and kind of talk people out of it. However, that hasn't been true since at least 2016, where over 50% of tech workers have claimed that they want a union or some sort of representation to try to get access to more rights on their job. And so, in a lot of ways, with this particular union forming and potentially being the largest such union to exist, if it does in fact succeed in its efforts, this would in fact be unprecedented. So, in that regard, they are correct. And they are somehow different, though, according to the company, than the other 10 unions that represent Times employees, and by blaming the breakdown of negotiations on what has been described as, quote, unusual tactics. However, there are no unusual tactics here at all. They claim that we were all disappointed in the union's decision to resort to a strike yesterday. That's a highly unusual tactic, just as NLRB process is getting underway, and unusual when done instead of engaging in a dialogue to resolve our differences. The steps that the company is taking now, which are attempting to work with the union to define the appropriate scope of the unit, are procedural, they're legal, and they're typical, and we believe that a constructive dialogue to reach agreements is the best way to move forward in this process along efficiently and fairly. Now, we know that's not the case. We know that the strategy that they've been using, based on what I just talked about, is that they want to shrink down the union using these NLRB methods to end up making it so that the union is either significantly weak or to make it so that the union fails in its election vote. They are opting for significantly weak so that the union is not powerful and does not represent all of its workers, essentially turning one group of workers against the other. We have that confirmed based on those emails. So we know that they're not trying to be efficient and fair about it, but they are trying to exploit the legal process in a way that is going to benefit them. And that's one of the benefits of them going through this long process. But as we've also come to find out, I did cover a bit of this, but again, there's new information here. About 70% of the people involved had said that they would vote in a AAA election, which would favor them voting in unionization. And they all said, we will vote yes in this. So 70% of those 600 people are likely to vote yes. Now, the Times management actually declined the meeting where they had said, we already have people to come in, which means that the process for the NLRB had to be enacted. And when they did so, the NLRB gives the business business days to respond. So, according to this article, the 12th was the date where where the company rather had to respond to that information. Which means as we go over the dates according to the week, on Monday, the Times management only agreed to bargain for the engineers, which means it cut the 200 to 250 people that included project managers, data analysis assistants, and other engineers in this project. On Tuesday, they tried to meet, and when they did, Keller and the Tech Guild presented their proposal for the bargaining unit and the arguments for it, which were brushed off, and the company basically stuck to its ultimatum that the bargaining unit would be engineers only. Now, obviously, this is based on that information that we just talked about, on how this would limit the union to a certain extent while not costing them any talent. On Wednesday, the Tech Guild walked out. As of today, the Times filled out its proposal for the bargaining unit to the NLRB, which only included the engineers, meaning they're the ones not organizing and discussing things and properly negotiating. They are sticking to their guns and they are going with what they started with. They are listening to the lawyers and ignoring any sort of aspects of the negotiation. Meanwhile, this Tech Guild has been trying to form a union since April. They've had these votes and the 70% committed for a while now. And so now they go through the NLRB, through the legal process, and therefore the union is now being pushed even further to try to be made smaller by this lawyer group. And so what's basically happening here is a clear set of circumstances that led to this walkout and have led to the union not negotiating, when it's actually the Times that are refusing to negotiate and are refusing to accept this union. They had the option to accept the voluntary union months ago, and again have chosen not to. And information like this coming out provides a lot of validation against these types of lies that companies consistently offer. They say that, there's all these allegations against these companies, but until they're proven by a labor board, you have to just go with the fact that they're allegations. But when you find these leaks of information, it's confirmation that these companies are trying to cover up their anti-union activity. And it's, again, validating. It's good to know that what we always have perceived will, in fact, come out to be true. They will often dismiss, the companies, all of these problems, and they'll put it onto the union and say that the union's not acting in good faith, but it is 99% of the time the company that's doing this stuff, and denying any wrongdoing while continuing these practices in order to secure their own financial position. Because that's what it's really all about at the end of the day. Even the Times, a company that's written extensively and made their profits off of writing articles that are pro-union, they will, even in their own sense, turn against unions for their own financial position and profit. They are a business at the end of the day, and that is where their bottom line is affected, and that is their end goal. This is why we can never trust these surface-level positions of such organizations, whose profit is gained off of people working for them. And as we know, the worker-boss dynamic is inherently going to create this type of antagonistic dynamic, where the interests are at odds, and they'll blame each other, but we have to deduce who is usually at fault here. And again, 99% of the time, it is the company who's trying to secure these positions, and they will lie, slander, and create all sorts of distortions about the union in order to secure their positions. So with that said, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Tara. I hope you all find ways to continue to support the New York Times Tech Guild, even if it is in small ways. Tech workers coming out is a really important thing, and we need to continue to support them, not just in the Times, but in all of the areas where they tried to form a union. Thank you again for watching.